It's my feel-good breakfast show.
It is your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso on S3. Welcome back, and you are just in time as we are about to get our chat underway. Now, there's no denying that the pandemic has changed each of us, and it has also affected our relationships with our family, our friends, and our partners immensely. Now, lockdown has also forced us to spend more time with our loved ones, and social events were put on hold and replaced with extended time indoors. Now, for some, this brought they brought people together. For others, it's completely been, that time where it just torn each other apart. And today we want to discuss re-evaluating our relationships in a post-pandemic world. And we are joined by clinical psychologist Kavashni Govender, as well as presenter and radio host Tracy Lang, who is here with us. And we want to encourage you at home to also join in on this discussion. And please WhatsApp us your voice notes to 063 408 8863. Ladies, good morning.
Hello. If this is pre-COVID, I would hug you because I'm like your biggest fan. And I tell Zoe this all the time. I'm like, oh my word, I can't wait to meet you. Finally, we have you on the couch. But also, Kavashni, I mean, really to be able to get your expertise on this. Because like Zoe said, a lot of people's relationships has changed over COVID, pre-COVID and post-COVID. In terms of how things have changed in a relationship dynamic, how has that been post-COVID?
I think that, the pandemic has brought with it a prolonged period of acute stress, uncertainty, and trauma. And that can't not change any kind of relationship, whether it's romantic, friendships, family relationships. That's had a profound impact.
It definitely has had an impact. And I know, Tracy, you've had, from what I was able to witness, a beautiful moment between lockdown. But in essence, from your personal side, how did this lockdown affect your relationships in terms of those with your friends and those with your family?
If I look at the relationship with my friends and family, I think I was fortunate because of radio. And let me explain why. Because of radio, I think you have this great pressure on you to make sure that you connect despite not seeing and having physical eye contact and physical contact with people. So you have to work incredibly hard on radio for that connection to happen. So I kind of just used that in my personal life to make sure that I could connect with friends and family telephonically. And I come from a really big family that set up games where we had to make sure we were in different WhatsApp groups and had these huge game nights of over 100 people playing together. We were very fortunate in that sense. So we made a lot of effort and suddenly we connected on a very different level. The loss of the physical contact, the loss of actually just sitting and being with each other, that was a totally different thing, of course, but suddenly you just made a point of being very much in this moment here. So when you said earlier on that I had many lovely moments, there were many of those. And I think it also speaks to the fact that I have a habit of kind of just getting on with it. I kind of saw this is the situation right now and let's get on with it. But I know it was incredibly rough for so many others. And speaking to many of my friends and family members, and let's make it very clear, being in lockdown, being a single person without kids was very, very different to being a parent and having to work full time while having to sit with your kids and do everything else. I think the pressures were very different.
Yeah. And I love what you said, that you have to make effort, because you have to make effort when it comes to relationships, when it comes to friendships, you have to put in the work. But that being said, the sad reality is that so many people found love, but also the divorce rate in South Africa went up to 20% during lockdown. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about pandemics or disasters or any kind of major crisis is that it brings up big feelings of anxiety, grief, even dread. And when there are these big feelings, they act as relationship accelerators. And what that means is that we all start to realize, life's too short and two things can happen. On the one hand, great, let's move in. This is great, let's move in, let's have babies, let's get married. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, you have people in relationships where, I've had enough of him. I've tolerated enough. The moment I can leave, I'm gonna leave. And so we see that kind of split where some people, their relationships are accelerated. We see baby booms, marriage booms, and on the other side, we see the divorce booms, where there's been a huge increase in divorce rates. And we've seen that in our practice, where we have been inundated with referrals from couples for couples therapy.
Okay.
So yeah,
But Vashni, sorry, just very quickly on that note, I spoke to someone the other day and they highlighted the fact that the pandemic was actually like war. It was like people being in war and how it changes everything. It was such a different world, and you feared for your life. And the moment that you think that your life's going to end, then all those things happen, right? Then you have to take advantage of every moment. And that's why it led to so many of those things.
And I think you're also forced to sit with your emotions because for many couples, they had to sit together. For 2 weeks, they isolated together. And now you start to see things, as opposed to seeing people over the weekend, like only over weekends. Now you're forced to see the person every single day. You start seeing those red flags. You start seeing the emotional availability, different things in the relationship. And maybe that's why it's accelerated, the divorce rate. And now having to see like the honesty in that relationship, sitting with, oh my word, this is the person that I'm going to have to spend the rest of my life with, not just in this dynamic. So maybe it could be that as well.
Definitely. Well, we are continuing this conversation for your Mental Health Monday. If you would love to get involved with us, please send us a WhatsApp. That line is open. You're welcome to send voice notes. That number is 063 408 8863. Send us your voice notes and we'll get to them a little bit later.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back, everybody. We are back with our mental health panel discussion this morning, and today we are re-evaluating our relationships in a post-pandemic world, featuring clinical psychologist Kavashni Govender, as well as presenter and radio host, I'm still fangirling over her, Tracy Lang. Now, of course, we are encouraging every single one of you at home to join in on the discussion, and please do WhatsApp us your voice notes to 063 408 8863. That being said, ladies, we do have anonymous that sent through a WhatsApp. Let's take a listen to it.
Good morning, Expresso. The lockdown broke my marriage to an extent that we were going to divorce last year, me and my husband. But before we could divorce, he passed away on the 26th of August, 2021.
Okay, so that was our voice note that came through. Kavashni, how can someone deal with that? Because you thought your relationship was heading for a divorce, and then all of a sudden there was the sudden passing of the partner. You've got, I'm assuming, many emotions and feelings going through. What is the best way for our anonymous voice noter to be able to process and move forward on something like this?
I'm just thinking exactly as you're saying, the complex layers of this. To lose someone that you're feeling upset with or angry with, because if they were moving towards divorce, it must have been difficult. There must have been angry feelings. And we talk about a complicated grief process. So, I'm thinking about how hard it must be for her to lose someone that you had these big feelings for, these angry feelings for. I would encourage her to speak to someone about it, make contact with someone from your church, a therapist, and work through it. She's bringing up something really important about, we call it an ambiguous loss. So the lockdown brought real loss. People had to consider their mortality, but also loss of life as we know it. Nothing is the same.
Yeah.
So people are dealing with loss on many, many levels at the moment.
Well, Anonymous, thank you for sending through those voice note and for being brave enough to share your story with us. Kavashni, just before we move on to our next voice note, what are some of the questions you need to ask yourself when you are in that moment of, feeling like this relationship's not working? I think the best possible outcome for us is to divorce and go our separate ways. What are some of the questions you need to ask yourself?
I guess one of the things is how suddenly this has come about. So, disasters or the pandemic brings these big feelings, and sometimes that can really impact a relationship. So are these old cracks in the relationship? Has this always been there? Or is this new? Is this the big feelings that come from the pandemic? It makes me think of a couple I worked with in therapy, and they were married for about 12 years, 3 kids, and suddenly they wanted to get divorced. And when we really looked at it in therapy, it wasn't so much about the relationship, but the husband lost his job, the wife was the main breadwinner, and that caused a whole lot of power dynamics and difficulties within the relationship. So I guess to understand, where is this coming from? Is this pandemic-related stuff, or is this relationship stuff only?
Okay, so many layers to unpack.
Definitely. We have another call on the another voice note. This one is from Nourisha from Johannesburg. Let's take a listen.
Good morning, Expresso team. Yeah, with regard to the lockdown, I've been with my previous partner for 4 years, and when lockdown came in, I guess we got worked on each other's nerves, and basically, yeah, the relationship fell through. We are no longer together, but I take it as if God doesn't give you what you want, it's rather God's protection. And I've since found another partner, and yeah, we engaged to be married.
That's beautiful, because you have that mindset, you know, saying like, if this wasn't from God, then it's not ideally for me for the next step. You're smiling, what you saying?
Because it is true. I think there's that saying, God's rejection is God's protection. And I fully believe that. I think it's a wonderful ending as well. Like you said, he definitely had the mindset to go, okay, cool, this wasn't for me. This was not where I was meant to be.
Definitely. We're speaking about a lot of heartbreaks and a lot of divorces, but something good also came out of lockdown. You got married, you found your love person, you've been together for 6 years, and then you started this brand new marriage. Tell us all about it and what lockdown did for your relationship as well.
Well, because my husband and I, our lives and our jobs kind of take us past each other all the time. So you can basically say we have a long-distance relationship while living together. That's just the reality of it. I mean, even at the point where he proposed to me, that day when I sat down with him, we spoke for 3 hours because I hadn't seen him all week, although we lived together. That's kind of what happened. That's just the reality of life nowadays too. And we had gotten engaged a couple of months before we went into lockdown, and our plan was to get married in 2020. So obviously everything was put on hold initially, and the moment the president uplifted the alcohol ban, my husband went, okay, so this is what's happening. We are now going to get married. And he's like, this was our initial date, which was going to be the 1st of October, which is my dad's birthday, and he had passed away in 2018. And he said to me, that's a month away. Do you think we can do this? And I said, I think we can. So the great thing about lockdown itself for the two of us was that we actually had time together. We could finally sit and spend time together and really connect with each other in a totally different way, which is something we can never do on a daily basis. We always have to set time aside. We always have to actively plan for that. We never sit and watch series together. That's not things that we could do. So we could do that then. The toughest time in lockdown, I have to be honest, was at the time, we were I think it was about 5 weeks into it's the 5th week of lockdown, and, the company, they had lost a few clients as well, and they had to make the decision to start the retrenchment process. And I remember my husband having to go to work to the office that morning. It was the one time we went to the office. That was at about 9, and he came home after 4, and he walked in the door, right past me. He didn't greet me. Walked straight to the bedroom, got into bed, and pulled the covers over his head. And I think that was the toughest time. And all he said to me, and I left him, and later on he came out and he said to me, I have to let 2 of my team members go. And it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And I remember that just bringing such a cloud over our home in that period, because it was hard and that was rough. And there were just so many things to deal with that. So that was tough.
And it's amazing that you were able to give him that space despite the fact that, being in lockdown forces people to be locked and confined to the home. But this is a conversation that needs to continue, so please don't go anywhere. We have our panel with us. If you want to get involved with a voice note, that WhatsApp line is open. It's 063 408 8863. Stay tuned to your Feel Good Breakfast show. The ladies will be back for one more chat.
It's my Feel Good Breakfast Show.
It is your Feel Good Breakfast show, Expresso on S3, and it's Monday, and this discussion is continuing on mental health, our Mental Health Monday. And today we are discussing re-evaluating your relationships in a post-pandemic world. Now, our panel consists of clinical psychologist Kavashni Govender, as well as presenter and radio host Tracy Lang. Now, they both are standing by with some positive words, and we really do encourage you at home to join in on this conversation. We have a WhatsApp voice note line open. That number is 063 408 8863. Now, before we get into our first voice note, Kavashni, are there any words or advice you would give someone that's potentially sitting on the fence right now and they were like, I don't know whether going forward in the relationship's the way, or maybe giving it another try and fighting and working our way through it? They're on that fence.
So it's a really interesting question, and the word fence is really interesting because if you're on the fence, it says to me that there's ambivalence. And the ambivalence in that says when there's ambivalence in the relationship, one, the relationship is bad enough that I want to leave, but you're also saying the relationship is so good that I want to stay. And I guess I would want to understand what that ambivalence is. Where is this coming from, and to make sense of it. Doesn't seem like there's a deciding factor. Yeah.
Okay.
But if someone did want to leave and they're more on the fence of like, this is actually something I need to do, I need to let go of this person, as much as it's going to hurt, but I just feel like our season and our time has come to an end. How do you motivate them to take that step and say, you know what, it's time for you to detach yourself from this person and move forward?
And sometimes relationships need to end. Sometimes relationships are bad, they're damaging, and relationships need to end. I guess to access your support, your friends, your family, and sometimes leaving a relationship can feel like a very scary and lonely process. So access people around you, friends, family, colleagues, so that it's not a lonely process and that you have people encouraging you and supporting you. Yeah.
Well, I know that the pandemic, we've now put the spotlight on couples' relationships, but relationships with family members have also had a different impact during this lockdown. Now, we have a voice note from Mishka in Johannesburg. Let's take a listen to this one.
Hi, my name is Mishka, and I live in Johannesburg. I'm 8 years old, and during lockdown, me and my mom and my dad was playing Scrabble and cards, and it brought us all together.
Oh, that was sweet. So yeah, lockdown did force a lot of people to sit together, to have time, play Scrabble, really just connect with one another, which is great. We also have another one from Kathleen from Germiston. She also had this to say.
Good morning, Expresso. During lockdown, we had a very strong bond as a family. We exercised together, we helped in the kitchen, we learned new recipes. So it was actually a time of learning and coping, and we did cope. It was actually wonderful.
Oh, see, hearing the positive things coming through. Tracy, from your side, what are the qualities as an individual and collectively as a couple that people should have to ensure that they have that healthy relationship between each other?
Well, I must say, I can only speak from experience, right? So in my case, mine and my husband, there's a lot of space in our togetherness. We are great alone and even better together then. But when we are alone, life is pretty good, and I think there's a lot of understanding that comes with that. I think that's one thing. You shouldn't be scared to ask the questions of, are you happy with me? Not just, are you happy? Are you okay with what I'm doing? Is everything still on track? My husband and I do, once a year, we do a relationship in Durban where we sit for hours and go, what are we working on this year? What are we looking at for our relationships, personally, work-wise, etc. Put all those things down and then touch base with each other. I think there's this great pressure you're too scared to hear the truth. But if you ask, you'll know what to work on, and vice versa. So do that. I think it's perfectly fine to ask each other all those different questions. And I'm also I'm a big fan of let's just please stop expecting your partner to be your everything and you to be everything for your partner. That's not how life works. I think we put so much pressure on each other to be this absolute everything when you should be surrounded by a circle of so many different people. And yes, I'm obviously saying that within context, of course, but if I listen to my husband speak to his colleagues and the things that they speak about, trust me, if I have to learn all those things, there's no way, if you had to share all of that with me, I just can't. I've got too many other things and I'm not smart enough, really. So I think let's take that pressures off each other as well, kind of expecting the other person to be absolutely everything to us and us to be that for them.
I think you have a great system going for yourself, and it all starts with communication. If I hear you, like it's having that conversation with your partner. Do you have any parting words for people sitting there saying, you know what, how can I get to that level? How can I get to a point where I can have this open conversation with my partner, where I can discuss and maybe disclose things that is difficult for me to disclose with them?
I'm all about not being reactive and very proactive. We are a fan, and we always have been since our first year of our relationship, of seeing a relationship therapist. I think sitting and waiting and wasting time before you go, okay, now we've been together 3 years and now let's have serious conversations. There isn't time for that. Have those in your first year. Go and see a therapist to ask those questions. And we do that once a year at least, where you actually sit with someone and then go, cool, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And they often ask you other things where you go, I've never thought of that. Do that. It's not about being reactive. Don't wait for things to fall apart. And they don't even have to fall apart. Just kind of go, are things on track? Let's go check it out. Just be proactive about it.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love that you have your relationship in Daba. Very, very important. Kavashni, any parting words from you just so that we can leave our viewers with a happy feeling?
Yeah. I think that, you know, whether you're deciding to stay in a relationship or leave a relationship, and especially when leaving a relationship, there's a due process that happens. And the due process is mourning the old, because you have to mourn the old. But also, there's something restorative and hopeful and exciting about expecting the new. And I guess to encourage people to get to know you, get to know you outside of a relationship, because people get very enmeshed in relationships and they lose their sense of self, their identities. Get to know you and lean on your tribe, lean on friends, lean on family, engage. And the pandemic has brought so many lessons with it, how we need to be connected, how we need to slow down. And I think now there's huge opportunities for all of us to grow in different ways, to really turn inward and look at ourselves and grow.
Definitely.
Yeah. Ladies, what a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Tracy, Kavashni as well. For you, I'm sure you've learned something from this conversation, so please do let us know what you did learn from this. And again, keep the conversation going. Expresso Morning Show on SC. We'd love to hear from you.